Hi guys, it's Insom here. So recently I've been up to more Killing Floor 3, and one thing I've realized about YouTube is that despite, putting a lot of effort in to edit some of my videos, the ones that I spend the most time on basically got no views whatsoever. So for those who don't know me, coming from the Dark Tide background, the one video that got me the most views was basically an hour-long unedited rant about, how to use builds for one of the highest difficulties in the game, and somehow or the other got me enough views to not only, get lots of traction on YouTube, but also have people harassing me on, like Discord and making fun of my YouTube career or whatever you want to call it. So in any case, I'll be putting out roughly estimated half an hour long rant on how I think people should be succeeding or at least getting better in Hell on Earth on Killing Floor 3. So let's get straight into it. So about the video, this is not going to be me spoon-feeding about specific builds or like telling you exactly what to do to win. There are no shortcuts in the learning process. If you want to get better at the game, you do have to go through the learning curve that's part of the game, progressing on normal if you're new to Killing Floor, at least doing like a hard game, and then finally doing Hell on Earth when you have your classes slightly leveled up or your weapons at least modded to some basic degree. There's a ton of build videos out there, and given that there's like only 6 perks and 16 weapons, the meta has kind of settled down already. There's not that much variety in terms of what you can do. So rather than doing that, in this video I'll try something different. I'm going to talk about some mechanics I've observed based on my experience as not only a Killing Floor 1 and 2 player, but also on my 100 hours spent on Killing Floor 3 and inferences and observations based on pattern recognition in my time spent on the game. So just to emphasize again, I hope that you as my audience are able to discern opinions from facts. Some things I'll point out is they are quite technical, and those are, obviously technically correct. And then there are some things that are subjective opinions, like build choices, damage types, and like how to deal with certain enemies, so on and so forth. Okay, but in any case, you have to decide for yourself what's right, what's wrong, at the end of the day, and you make the decisions that you are responsible for. So one thing I would just like to introduce about myself is that I do not consider myself a rather casual player. I think I'm quite a sweaty tryhard. Some of you may like this, some of you may not. The key thing is that if you were to draw like a Venn diagram, 2 circles where one is like playing to win and the other is playing to have fun, I did consider myself a fairly fortunate guy in the sense that both of my circles tend to overlap into a perfect, circle, and I don't really differentiate. I don't discriminate between playing to win or playing to have fun because to me they are one and the same. If I lose, it's part of the learning curve, and if I don't win after like trying many things, it's not going to be fun for me in the long run. Right, so all that being said, we're all aware that Killing Floor 3 over the last 2 weeks has shown that it's in a relatively unpolished state, I would say. But for what it's worth, I'm still enjoying it, despite all its flaws. So I'll still keep on doing content as long as I'm having fun at this game. Now, about a week ago, the Tripwire devs released this statistics on Steam community. They claim that the Hell on Earth winning difficulty was about 0.4%. I don't think this is accurate. I think this is a gross underrepresentation, probably influenced by the influx of new players and also the fact that people are just trying out, experimenting things as it is. I did wager the actual win rate is probably closer to something along the lines of maybe 20 to 30%, and if you factor in like multiplayer elements, it's probably going to be slightly lower, maybe 5 to 10. But I don't think it's Hell on Earth is this like pinnacle of difficulty that only 1 out of 250 people can beat. I do think like the actual number of people beating Hell on Earth is on a much higher magnitude, especially with the advent of things like the Vulcan and stuff, which totally messes up and screws up the game balance. So there are many broken synergies in this game right now that basically make things or trivialize things, makes things a lot easier. For example, like the Commando with his gadget, using explosive weapons is basically getting free headshots even if it's not hitting the head, which is like kind of ridiculous, honestly, if you ask me. So yeah, with the number of flaws in this game, there's definitely a lot of problems, and game balance might take a while to settle down. They might do balance passes and changes, nerfs maybe, hopefully, or preferably buffs to other weapons in the future. It's really up to Tripwire how they decide to deal with things. But yeah, so in any case, I do think that Hell on Earth is something that should be accessible to everybody, provided they have the tenacity to try hard enough. So in my personal experience, I've basically maxed out all the classes after about 100 plus hours at the game. Majority of the runs were done in solo, one player Hell on Earth. I did do 4 out of 6 of the classes on solo Hell on Earth, also while leveling them up. So of the 32 runs I did on the Sharpshooter, the Engineer, in the Commando and the Firebug, most of my runs were completed before I even hit level 30. Basically, I did one of every single map on Hell on Earth before I even hit level 30, and the remaining was done by grinding, you know, like on Hell on Earth, like just trying it over and over again, getting XP for it. So one thing to note is, don't do this. If you want to level efficiently, Hell on Earth while giving you the most XP is not advisable. The reason for this is because that once you hit level 30, you're still not going to have enough proficiency points to level up at least one of every skill in each of your tiers. So what you want to do is basically grind hard, because hard gives 80 proficiency points on average, Hell on Earth gives 120, and it usually takes about twice, maybe just almost as twice as long to do a Hell on Earth run as it does compared to hard. So, and in the long run, once you hit level 30, you're being gate capped by PP and not your XP. So if you're looking to just like grind and like complete everything, it's better to just do fast runs on Convoy. You can probably do like 8 to 9 minute runs efficiently with the Vulcan and making sure you skip the trader waves. So yeah. And so for those who don't already know, like proficiency points are the things that are this thing here, like the one with the bonus Z time below. And you basically get this by ranking up your abilities. So when coming back to the topic of Hell on Earth, what makes exactly for an ideal run? Like what's consistent? Like how do you judge what's a good way to win Hell on Earth, and how do you know that the run went smoothly, it went well? You know, there are many qualitative aspects to it on top of the quantitative metrics. So the first thing that comes to me is that, you know, you don't want to play a multiplayer game where like a level 1 guy is just basically spending 20 minutes kiting in the wave 4 or 5 where there's like 7 flash pounds chasing him for 30 minutes across the map. It's not fun to just sit there and just play spectator for 80% of the time. Sure, you know, maybe like once or twice, but to do that for the majority of the playtime that you have available to you, not fun. So to have winning consistent Hell on Earth runs, I would say, or maybe on the order of what, 80 to 90%, okay, maybe 70 to 80%, but permitting small errors. You want to be winning your games on this order of probability. And on top of that, you also want to be winning them efficiently, or rather fast. Like you can spend 45 minutes kiting and win, sure, but like it's not fun in the grand scheme of things. So I do think that like on average, based on my experience, if you're doing and abusing the Vulcan for all the bullshit, you're probably going to clear in like 20 minutes. The fastest I did was maybe 17, 18 minutes if the conditions line up right. But a good typical average run would take something like 25 minutes. A bad run where, you know, maybe you're under leveled, you brought in the wrong weapons, the wrong modifiers, it'll probably take you maybe 35 minutes. And the worst ones are the ones where it goes like 45 minutes, and it basically means that your bladder's probably going to explode at the end on the run. Now, another thing that comes to mind is also something that I saw on Reddit recently about people, you know, humble bragging about how they have 3 million damage, 2 million damage, etc. on, you know, 6-player Hell on Earth runs. I do want to say that, you know, while good for you and all, like, you know, you clearly have the ability to clear Hell on Earth even on 6-player. You have the ability to carry your team, but, you know, this kind of metrics aren't the be all and end all. These are not the things you should be chasing, because many of the times you'll find that if you try to do this and try to pull this off, you're not able to do it because hopefully your teammates are a little bit more competent, or rather you will probably end up in a failure because you run out of ammo, you can't get to the trader to resupply, and so on and so forth. So yeah, the scoreboard as it is shouldn't be interpreted in a way where you're trying to chase damage numbers. You should be trying to chase the angle, which is success for the team, in order to get your icon from the boss drop. So yeah, don't chase superficial numbers for the sake of chasing it. Chase victory and success, looking at the qualitative aspect as well. So, to get into the meat of the video, let's talk about what Killing Floor 3 is at its core, or in my opinion. So, just like its predecessors, I think Killing Floor has always been a resource management game. And in earlier installments of the game, like Killing Floor 1 and 2, there's always been a much bigger emphasis on your execution in the game rather than what you do outside of it, like preparing what you do to prepare to go into it. Because in Killing Floor 1, for those who aren't unaware, there's no such things as builds. Or like you get a sharpshooter, you get a weapon, you go in, you start the game, and that's it. There's no theory crafting beforehand. There's no preparation time. There's no operational budget. You just go in, you play the game as it is. And then Killing Floor 2 added a little bit of variety with like left and right decisions in every 5 levels in the skill tree. And then now in Killing Floor 3 you have not complicated per se, but like more flash out skill trees where you can decide between like at least 5 different bonuses for your passives, your throwables, and your gadgets. Right, and then of course you have your weapons with all the weapon mods and different damage types. But at the end of the day, you can take the best build in, and if you play like shit, you're still gonna lose. Like you can have the top 0.1% build, but if you play like the bottom feeder if you play like a bottom feeder player, you're gonna lose anyway. So aside from things like your operational budget and making sure that you use it to the best of your potential, you also have to manage your resources, things like your hit points from your armor, your health. And also one thing to consider is also that attention span, which means to say like how much time you spend killing an enemy, looking at an enemy, observing things in-game, is also a resource that you have limited of. You're not a robot, you're a human, right? You have limited time to spend when to focus on multiple things at the same time, and there are going to be multiple distractions or many things for you to focus on in-game, especially if you're not a seasoned first-person shooter player. So things like, you know, having a low time to kill, being able to one-shot and meet your breakpoints on trash sets, being able to deal with big enemies, even without abusing things like the Vulcans, all this is going to add up and make a difference to you. Right. So again, I'm not going to emphasize too much on how to build your skills and perks. I think I'll probably do that in a separate installment of videos, but the main idea is if you're going to make a build, make sure that you have in equal parts balance out your offense, defensive, and of course your utility capabilities. So for example, offenses, I did briefly allude to this earlier, things like being able to one-shot your trash mobs like your Sys, Clots, Crawlers, Gorfas, I will also consider trash as well. And then on defense, you want to be able to recover and sustain your armor and your health over time. So one thing I've heard on Reddit, I'm not sure how true this is, but like apparently many of the players going from like the more casual difficulties like normal and hard and to hell on earth is that supposedly some people don't even upgrade their armor at all, they just go full offense. And any seasoned player on hell on earth knows that you are going to take damage. It's not something that's you can't play a whole Hell on Earth game and sustain 0 damage whatsoever. Maybe in Killing Floor 1 and 2 you could, but in Killing Floor 3 there's no way that's going to happen. So having that in mind, you do need to budget for things like your resources, getting your utility tools back, your Stranger's Recovery, being able to recover your armor in a wave, by the way, that's a very, very good thing to have. And lastly will be on your utility tools, which is basically saying you don't just want to point and click at things and wait for them to die. That's going to make for very boring gameplay. You do want to have your crowd control, debilitating status effects like Enfeeble, Confusion, and Stumble on each and every one of your classes, especially if you're playing as a solo player and you can't rely on anyone else to get your ass safe. So make sure you have all those provided for in your kit when you're planning to make a build for it. So on the Dosh economy, if you're moving from hard to Hell on Earth, I think just for those who are not aware, Hell on Earth does provide you plenty of cash, enough such that by waves 3 you should have on average about 5 to 6k, usually enough to start affording the Vulcan or your N-tier weapons, and the rest of the budget of the wave should be going into things like your armor upgrades, getting a second primary weapon so you can deal with the bosses. But in general, I will just introduce a very simple acronym for you to deal with the Hell on Earth or manage your Dosh economy a little bit better. It's FGPT, or Friendly GPT, which demonstrates my immense passion for AI source information. So operational budget is that thing that you see at the beginning of the wave. This thing levels up with if you have more levels on your perks, but essentially you want to use it or you're going to lose it. It doesn't change the amount of Dosh you get per wave, and it doesn't change your starting amount of Dosh. That's a fixed constant. But what it does is that it enables you to start with things like maybe an upgraded tier 1 or tier 2 weapon alongside maybe armor if that's what you want. So this translates directly into Dosh that you can choose to sell off immediately, assuming it's not armor, for higher gains in the earlier waves like waves 1 and 2. Now the next thing is something that's kind of like a personal preference thing, but I do find that grenades in this game are particularly expensive and many times probably not even worth it to use unless you have absolutely nothing else at your disposal. Grenades a piece cost $200, 200 Dosh in this game, and that's honestly not cheap. You get, what, 75 Dosh from killing a Scrake, 90 from a Flash Pound, and in the early waves there aren't that many Scrakes and Flash Pounds to go around, so Dosh economy is going to be pretty tight. Once you're at level 30, you start out with 4 grenades, and you only want to use this when you really need to and you have nothing left in your current split-second decision making. Right, so if you have ammo, you still can kite, you don't really want to use your grenades yet, but if you're in an oh shit moment and you really need something to get out of it, that's probably when you want to pop your grenades. Or at least that's my personal playstyle. So, in relation to the fully utilizing your operational budget, the third point will be on prepping a modded tier 1 or tier 2. Once again, for Reddit, I've heard complaints that there are many people that just try to go straight from starting weapons to the Vulcan by wave 2, and a lot of the times you realize that they either can't afford it or they are not well equipped to deal with the threats that start appearing on wave 2, especially when they have a low armor pool. So, that being said, do prepare decent serviceable tier 1s or tier 2s, maybe even the sharpshooter secondary. I do have like a couple of videos where I've completed runs with purely the sharpshooter secondary and no primary weapons alone. So it's not as if the Vulcan is the only viable weapon in this game. There are actually many more viable weapons, just that the Vulcan is just stupid, busted and broken right now. So unless you're playing the Commando with the preferred customer skill, which gives you 30% off discounts on the trader, most likely you won't be able to afford your best weapons by wave 2. So do prepare like some middle or early game options for you to deal with the earlier waves. And lastly, on the fourth point, tools like your multi-tool, your explosive door locks, your electric shock traps, ammo bags, medic crates, and your pulse lures, all those things, they're really cheap and they're really good for what they do compared to the grenades. So if you a well-placed like multi-tool at a fan, or like having a zipline that allows you to kite faster, turrets allow earlier for you, all those things will help you immensely in the early stages of the wave when you don't have the dodge. So make sure you choose the right tool going into the wave and you exploit the hell out of it as you can to enhance your survivability and your win rate of clearing hell enough. So up to now, everything we've talked about has been things that you can do before you actually start the game proper. Now when it comes to win, or at least how to win, Killing Floor has always had the trend of punishing positional mistakes. What a tongue twister that is. So if you're staying too long in the same spot, you're probably going to get surrounded and die. If you walk into a dead end and while needing to reload and not have any rounds in your magazine, you're probably going to be dead. If you want to try to man fight a boss who can basically two-shot you, you're probably going to die as well. So sometimes the essence of it is that roaching out like a coward and spending the time to kite is for the better, but you don't want to be kiting forever, of course. It's just a matter of making split-second decisions as to whether you want to run or fight. So you do have to make a judgment call and observe whether the situation can be too hot for yourself, whether you need to back off and come back, fight another day. And at the end of the day, everyone wants to win. You don't want to die just because you try to be greedy with the execution, or you try to do something that costs you more armor and health than what you actually needed to lose. So if you can play it safe, but do make sure to mix in your chances of dealing damage in aggression and while you're kiting as well. So when it comes to movement, someone's already put out a better video on this. If I'll introduce you to Mr. PooSH, he's a long-time Killing Floor player, only has like 1,000 subscribers, but I don't want to reinvent the view. He has spent like 2 videos talking in detail about what are the best movement steps in Killing Floor, and he does a very good job explaining how to do this, what to do it in kind of a funny way. So I'll link those videos in the description below. But that being said, I don't think you need to move like how he describes in the video to win. But it may help you bridge the gap between clearing hard and when you make the jump from hard to hell on earth. Right, so being able to move well, kite well, making sure you have your knife out when you're running, making sure to get your blocks in, so on and so forth, parrying when you need to, all those might save you. So when it comes to kiting, what's also important is basically your knowledge of each map. There isn't an easy way to elaborate on this without having to go into specifics for each and every map, but if you have enough tenacity and with enough experience, you'll know which paths are dead ends, like when to take your zip lines, how to use your mantling and climbing to your opportunity, which paths are escape routes, etc. And also make sure to use your eyes and ears. Don't always keep looking in the same direction. Enemies can approach you from multiple spawns, sometimes behind you, sometimes on top of you. And despite what many in the game have been complaining about, there are audio cues that are fairly obvious in this game. If you do like recordings of your own gameplay footage, try to listen out. I do have to admit, while it's not too obvious perhaps to some people, after like 100 hours of playtime, I'm able to predict with quite high consistency and reliability almost all the enemy types in the game, with the exception of the goddamn crawlers, those little shits. Right, but in essence, there are audio cues, there's a lot of feedback in the game that allows you to make your decisions better, but you just need to be able to pay attention to and respond to them accordingly. So, as we mentioned earlier, when it comes to fighting, when you do decide to stop kiting, or maybe sometimes when you're in the midst of kiting and just turning around to get some pot shots at enemies, you always want to have an eye on your resources that's on hand. Things like your health, your syringers, your ammunition in your existing magazine and what you have on reserve, as well as your tools and grenades that are available to you. Right, so an efficient player would use everything at your disposal when needed, and at the back of your mind, you should also be calculating costs of depleting your resources. Sometimes when I'm feeling greedy or when I'm feeling a little bit impatient in the wave, I do make split-second decisions to take fights, like trade blows. I'm going to say like maybe I want to fight a little bit, take a few blows on there, but do some good damage, consistent damage to the heavy flash wall that's been chasing me across half the map. And Hell on Earth is a battle of attrition. You will take damage, and you do have to budget for this. So when you make all these decisions and it comes to it, right, it does take time and adjustment, but it's part of the learning curve when it comes to playing a killing floor game. Right, so over time, as you get better, you will learn to make better decisions. You'll hopefully be punished less for bad decisions and rewarded more for good decisions that will enable you to clear a match efficiently and successfully. So just like its predecessors in the killing floor game, the maximum number of enemies on the map are hard capped. That means that at any one point in time, there is a quota on the maximum number of enemies that can be present on the map. So for example, at least in solo play on Hell on Earth, you're probably looking at, in a non-mutated round, maybe 20 to 25 enemies at any one point on the map. So what happens is that if you do kill enemies that, let's say, that you're running from, that are behind you, this will trigger fresh spawns, provided there's still like a spawn quota available that will spawn at nearest locations. Very often these spawn locations will be on your exit location. So if you're playing a narrow map with very little room for kiting like sewers, this means to say that very likely they're going to spawn in a narrow corridor in front of you and block off your approach paths. So the role that you want to do, or at least the things that you want to do to make sure that you're prepared for this, is that you don't want to kill too many things, or at least you want to make sure that you have an exit strategy and exit plan. Whether is it you have your second primary weapon out to have enough ammo to deal with enemies, whether you have your grenades, your abilities, or if you're able to take a zip line, dodge them by mantling or kiting around them further. So all these things you have to plan and take into account. Okay, so some of this comes with failing and making mistakes. That's fine. I think at the end of the day, the end goal is that if you want to learn, it's okay to make mistakes. And one of the typical mistakes I just shared, like, which is regarding like tunnel visioning and mech dumping into Zeds behind. Sometimes you do get greedy and you misjudge the number of enemies left. You mech down with the enemies behind, enemies spawn in front of you, you get sandwiched and you kiss the floor because you're caught reloading. And so this is a very common mistake. Don't be afraid if you make it, but it's more important for you to learn from the process. Now, let's talk about managing the spawns. On top of that, there's the spawn director and the mechanics behind it. One thing I've noticed from Killing Floor 3 especially is that they do tend to backload the waves. Now what do I mean by backloading? This means to say that typically the heavier Zeds will come out in force on the later waves, or at least the last portion of the wave, usually the last 10 to 20% of the spawns. So for example, it's not uncommon to see maybe 3 Squigs at the end of wave 2, or for waves 3, 4 and 5 maybe sometimes you see up to 6 or 7 Squigs and Flash Pounds chasing you throughout the map. And what this means is that usually the last part of the wave is also the hardest. So knowing this, right, you want to budget your resources accordingly. Maybe sometimes this means that you go for a resupply earlier, when you have the opportunity to. Otherwise, you probably have to end up kiting throughout like the entire map just to dodge them and slowly wither away at their health, which is kind of undesirable because this can be pretty draggy. So I do want to take the time to just focus briefly on one example here. So if you see, I'm basically at the end of wave 5. I'm going to go back to wave 4 here. Right, so in this video, basically, my teammates died, unfortunately. I'm playing with a group of friends on 6-man Hell on Earth, and I'm an underleveled level 11 medic. Right, so, and what happened was that basically we lost almost all of our damage dealers, and I did lose my last companion around here as well. And I was basically spending the next 10 minutes just kiting, throwing grenades, going to the resupply, just fighting throughout the wave, and you know, it's honestly not fun for most people. Like, by the time you do this, people are going to be fed up with you, and like if you're a group of friends or if you're close to winning, yeah, sure, fine. But on a general pub lobby, you know, people are going to run out of patience. They're either going to leave, or in the worst case, they're going to vote kick you. And you don't really want to be caught out in this kind of scenarios. You want to be able to deal with this kind of plans. Of course, that being said, me being underleveled that isn't helping at all in this scenario, and I only have a tier 4 medic that's like barely modded with no damage dealing potential, so it took me a while to basically deplete everything. Yeah, but the essence is that, you know, make sure you plan for this kind of scenarios. You don't want to be kiting forever. It's just not very fun at all. Alright. So coming back to the main essence of the video, if we go back to it, let's talk about something that I think most of you, I couldn't find any information about this online. Let's talk about the mutations. So mutations in the context of your regular games, it isn't something that's exclusive to Hell on Earth. It happens on, I believe, normal and hard as well. This is different from the weekly mutation. It's a slightly different set of mechanics. The weekly mutation is a mutation that is basically there throughout the entire wave and including the boss run. Random mutations on Hell on Earth will take place in the form of things. There's like 7 possible different mutations that can occur on waves 2, 3, 4, or 5. Right, so in particular, I think wave 2 is worth mentioning. It's either spawning your horde mode or your fodder, and this can be a game ender for many of your unprepared teams with the sheer number of spawns that can come at you when you don't have your late game weapons like the Vulcan yet. And one other special mention goes out to Hellfire on wave 4, which spawns like many increased quantities of husk coming your way. And one of these modifiers basically incentivizes you finding cover, going indoors, and basically it encourages you to not touch grass. You don't want to be outdoors when the husks come because you're likely going to get bombarded by all the projectiles and lose all your armor in the process. So I have here a table of like the full list of mutations available and the respective bonuses, buffs to the Zs and buffs to the specialists or your perk damage as well. If you need more time to look through this, feel free to pause the video. But do note that there cannot be 2 consecutive waves of mutations. So if you've gotten a mutation on wave 2, for example, you won't get one on wave 3, you can only get one on waves 4 or 5. If you do have one on wave 4, you can't get one on wave 5, so you can use this to plan accordingly and, you know, make decisions as to what weapons you want to get throughout the wave. Right, so you're able to predict in advance once you've gotten a mutation on X wave, for example. Now, I don't know if they'll add more mutations in time to come. I do sincerely hope they will, because I do want them to spice things up a little. But only time will tell as to what Tripwire will decide to do with their game mode. Now, lastly, on the topic of dealing with bosses of Hell on Earth, just like map knowledge, I can't exactly spoon-feed information on this. The best advice I can give is that if you're still lacking confidence and you can't really read the boss telegraph attacks that well, do some practice runs on solo. They hit less hard, you're not affected by as much by factors out of your control like server latency, high ping, etc. So at least do learn like how the boss patterns are like, how they do the telegraph attacks, and I would say that if you're at least able to deal with the bosses on solo, you should be a little more prepared on Hell on Earth multiplayer. So instead of like going to Hell on Earth multiplayer and start complaining about why the boss is one-shotting you, you know, if you're able to deal with it on solo, you should be more well equipped to deal with it even on multiplayer. So before I end off, I just want to bring attention to something that I thought was really interesting in my comment section. So just the other day, someone wanted to start an internet debate with me on the topic of whether or not Zs have more health in multiplayer versus co-op. and I thought I'd put out some statistics just to debate this point. Right, so this scoreboard comes from the video that's playing in the background. This is a 6-player Office Hell on Earth with 6 people I found on Discord. And if you want to tabulate the results, I've basically done this for you. The total number of kills is about 2,000 plus, 2,300. This includes a horde mutation on wave 2. And the total damage done, including the boss, amounts to about 5 million damage. So based on my other runs, I've done like at least 7 6-player Hell on Earth runs with a full team from start to finish. The average damage is probably going to be about 4 to 5 million, and the average number of kills is going to be about 2,000, give or take some variation from the mutations. And if you compare this to a solo run, which is something like this here, identical mutations, hot mode on wave 2 as well. Unfortunately a different boss because I can't exactly control the factors there. The average number of kills is going to be something like 400, and your damage dealt is about 800,000, 900,000 odd. And looking at the math, I have at least 24 recorded footages of runs. Sorry, not 24, like more than 30 runs of me doing solo Hell on Earth runs. And there's about 5 times the number of enemies, and the damage kind of does translate exactly to about 5 times more damage. So this means to say that because the lion's share of your damage and enemies comes from, you know, the waves from waves 1 to 5, and you're not going to get that many from bosses, basically the Zs, the common Zs at least, have almost the same amount of health. And if you do some simple testing in-game, even without team buffs, you'll notice that you're still hitting your one-shot breakpoints on your common Zs and trash Zs. Your Flash Pounds and Skrakes are still dying to your Ifrit Vulcan shots in 2 or 3 shots, this and that, so on and so forth. So, in a nutshell, just to debunk the myth, the common Zs at least have the same number of health. Now, the only thing that has a different scale, operating on a different scale, will be your bosses. I think that's quite clear-cut. Most people will know this by now if you have enough experience. But otherwise, you know, common Zs, Flash Pounds and Skrakes included, all have the same number of health. Right. So that being said, I'm not against people disagreeing or criticizing me in the comments, but if you wish to start a debate, at least come prepared with something more substantial. Posts with energy like those that just go, "Trust me bro," or "AI overview said otherwise," are so low quality that I just rather not see it. And you're not going to get anything constructive out of trying to pick or start a fight or start a debate with, you know, unconstructive comments like this. So at least like come prepared with something more substantial, right? So all this being said, if you made it this far, thanks for watching to the end. Over the next few days, I do intend to upload some solo Hell on Earth playthroughs with my opinions on what I think is the hardest map, sewers, and of course my personal recommended builds using quote-unquote ethical builds. This means to say that I'll use weapons only pulling from the exclusive perk classes. That means, for example, I'll only be using the Knight's Bridge on the Commando. I will not be using the Vulcan or other classes. I'll only be using the Kunais on the Ninja. The only class that has the exclusion to this will be the Firebug, obviously, and I think that will also be a good demonstration as to how busted and broken the Vulcan is in terms of making runs that much more easy and trivial. So if you'd like to check that out, don't forget to subscribe and check back over the next week. I'll do uploads maybe on a daily basis, depending on my schedule. Otherwise, thanks again for tuning in. I hope that this information is helpful to you. And otherwise, this is Installments signing off.